The stream is about to start.
The stream has started.
Okay.
Recordings.
I can start recording too.
Isabel.
Now, I don't know what you're going to see when I flip over to the story, but you should still see us on the home church channel.
Okay.
So it may change. Yep. Now we see you on this little tiny screen. And I got to figure out how to move that screen off my reading area.
Well, Isabel, you don't have to.
Jeremy, how do I do this
Drag
with
it
the
and move it.
touchpad?
Just
Drag
like,
How do you drag it
just
with
like
a
tap
touchpad?
and
Tap it
hold
and
it.
drag it.
Just like a mouse,
tap
it's
and
like
drag.
clicking.
Double tap and
Tap and
drag.
drag.
Just
Usually.
tap it and hold it and drag.
Touchpad.
And you just gotta keep some pressure.
Like Jeremy earlier.
I don't blame you, I would bark too.
Or you can drag too.
Trying to get it out
She
of the way
does
of
not
the
like
reading, so I guess
Jeremy.
I'd have to
She
order.
hates Jeremy.
In fact, oh, okay.
She's down there talking to my mama.
Bell, chill.
Okay, that'll work.
Tell
I
him,
should be able to
Isabel.
make heads
Tell
and
him,
tails.
Isabel.
Yeah, I wonder.
We'll switch back. Okay.
Well, let me invite you just to bow your heads for just a moment. Just pause a sec. Isabel,
Isabel,
pause. Pause. Huh?
Put Isabel on hold.
Yeah. Okay, let's pray. Father, we want to thank you so much for your many blessings throughout the week. You've kept us safe. You've brought us here. You've given us a beautiful day in which to come together and worship you and to study. And Lord, we're seeking insight, understanding, perspective. We need all these things as we face the trials just before us, leading up to those events discussed in the book of Revelation. We ask and pray a blessing on our time together. We do ask, Lord, that you be with all those who are watching or joining us online, and that certainly you would guide and direct us and prepare us for what lies ahead. So thank you for being here and doing only what you can do. And thank you so much for your great love that you've demonstrated. And may we respond to it in a tangible way that might influence the lives of others as well. And we ask these mercies in Jesus' most wonderful name. Amen and amen.
Amen.
Okay.
We have just a little bit more to go in this book. Technically 3 chapters, but I don't know how long they're going to take. But this one is called Packages from America. Eventually, the supply of food brought home from Eskenrod ran out, and again the family went hungry. But God always provided. Faithful church members continued to pay their tithe in food items. A head of cabbage here, a few potatoes there. Once Franz brought home a 100-pound bag of navy beans. How delicious they smelled when Helene cooked them. After she dished them into bowls, however, the children quickly lost their appetite when they noticed maggots floating on top. But in the end, their hunger won out, and they scooped off the maggots and ate the rest.
It's called protein.
Right.
Well, that's a nourishing way to start our Sabbath morning.
Maggot beans.
Sometimes amid the dreariness, there were bright spots. It was Lottie's job to walk the 2 miles to the Hugostrasse every other day to buy the family's supply of milk. One blustery day, as she was fighting her way through a biting storm, an army jeep full of American soldiers roared by. Something hit her body. When she glanced up, she saw that the young GIs were waving to her. On the ground around her lay a roll of lifesavers, the first she had ever seen. Delightedly, she grabbed the colorful candy and hid it deep in her pocket. Another time early in the spring, Helene wanted to make a sauce to serve with oatmeal. So she sent Gerd to their leased garden plot to see if any of the rhubarb stalks were big enough to pick. Though he looked carefully through the garden, he only saw rhubarb sprouts. Disconsolately, he was trudging back along the muddy path when he saw a lone American soldier standing in the field with a huge brown paper bag. He beckoned to Gerd and put the bag in his arms. "Please take this to your mother right away," he said in fluent German. Dumbfounded, Gerd took the bag and staggered home with it. Inside, the family discovered enough groceries to last a week. Powdered eggs, powdered milk, butter, dried fruit, and flour. "Gerd, did you thank this man?" "No, Moody, I was too surprised to know what to say." "Go back immediately and thank him. This is an answer to prayer." Gerd went back, but even though he could see miles across the flat fields, there was no one there. Some time later, Helene sent Gerd to the basement to fetch potatoes for breakfast. Gerd carefully searched for anything edible, but the shelves were empty, the sacks lay limp. In one of the barrels he found a single small potato. Helene cut it into 6 slices and fried them for breakfast. 1 small slice of potato for each person. That morning, Franz spent an extra long time saying grace. He reminded God how he had provided throughout all the hard years and asked him to continue to sustain the family. With growling stomachs, the children waited for the interminable prayer to end. Then Helene said, "Eat your food very slowly. God has given you 32 teeth so that you can chew each bite 32 times. If you eat slowly, the food is more filling." They ate slowly but left the table hungry anyway. The older children went to school, and a little while later Franz got on his bicycle to make some pastoral visits. "I'll be back at noon," he said, "so you can have lunch ready by then." Helene rolled her eyes. "I will if I have anything to fix. Remember, we're out of food." She spent the morning doing housework while Susie tagged along dusting and polishing the furniture. Helene's heart was heavy, knowing the children would be hungry by the time they came home from school. At 11:45, she decided she would put some water to boil and put a little salt in it. "We'll just have to pretend it's soup," she said. As she filled the kettle at the sink, she glanced out the window and noticed that the mail van had drawn up outside the house. Curiously, she watched as the mailman got out a gigantic package. "I wonder who that's for," she thought. Then she turned around and put the kettle on the burner. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Susie went to answer it. She came running back. "Moody, a man wants you." Helene went to the door where the mailman handed her the delivery book to sign. "Frau Hassel, I have a package from America for you. Please sign that you have received it." "Oh," said Helene, disappointed, "if it's from America, it isn't for us. We don't know anybody there. It must be a mistake." Flip to the next page. "It's for you," the mailman said. "Look, that's your address, isn't it?" Helene bent over the brown wrapper. The address was in large block letters. Family Hassel, Frankfurt on Main, New Sale 97. There could be no mistaking it. Mystified, she looked the package over, and on the wrapping in bold letters were the words, "Gift Parcel." Helene's face blanched. She grabbed the door frame for support. Gift in German means poison. Stunned, she said, "Why are they sending us a poison parcel from America? Who wants to destroy us now? I don't want this." The mailman smiled. "Frau Hassel, in English, a gift is a present." "Oh," she said with a trembling breath, "then I'll accept it." In a daze, she signed the delivery book and heaved the heavy package onto the kitchen table. She cut the dirty string and tore the worn wrapping paper, and out came a sturdy cardboard box filled with food. There was a bag of Pillsbury flour, a can of Crisco shortening, all this great stuff for me, macaroni, powdered milk, powdered eggs, rice, sugar, dehydrated potatoes, cookies, soup mixes, nuts, and dried California figs and other fruit. A mysterious rustling bag turned out to be M&Ms. The table was piled high. Helene felt her knees buckling. She quickly sat down. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered fervently. "Why did I ever doubt you? A package from America. You have promised that even before we call, you will answer. This package has traveled across the ocean for weeks, and we did not know that we would need it so badly this very day, but you knew all along." Now she jumped up. It was just a few minutes before noon. The salted water was already boiling. Quickly she dumped some macaroni in, put some prunes to stew in another pot, and soon delicious smells wafted through the house. The doorbell rang again. 2 short rings and 1 long one, the family signal. The children burst through the door. "Oh, Mutti," they wailed, "we're so hungry, and somebody somewhere is cooking wonderful food." "Come into the kitchen," Helene said with a radiant smile. "I have a surprise for you." Their eyes bulged when they saw the loaded kitchen table. Now they knew it was their own meal they smelled through the hallway outside. Soon all were seated around the table, and for the first time in weeks, they all ate their fill. After the meal, the family wondered about the origins of this mysterious package. Carefully, they pieced the torn wrapping paper together and deciphered the return address. A name, a street in Lodi, California. They'd never heard of Lodi. They knew no one there. So immediately they wrote a thank you letter telling about the parcel's mysterious and miraculous arrival. Several months passed, no reply. Not realizing that Lodi has a large population of Germans, they decided the sender probably didn't understand German. So they wrote a second letter and had someone from the church translate it into English. After 6 months, the letter came back. The torn, dirty envelope bearing a large red postal stamp. Return to sender, addressee unknown. So who was this mysterious benefactor? And about a year after the mysterious parcel, another package arrived from Lodi, California. This time the sender was someone named Lillian Bunch, who lived at a different address. In large letters, it again bore the legend, gift parcel. In panic, Helene forgot what the mailman had told her months before. "Stay away from this box," she shouted to the children, "or we'll all die." Mutti, it's okay. Fortunately, Kurt had learned a few words of English in school and could reassure her that gift means it's a present. Oh, that's right. Relieved, she opened the package, and again there was food. So again the Hassels composed a thank you letter, and this time they got an answer. Once Lillian learned that the Hassels had 3-year-old Susie, she wrote back that she had a 3-year-old son named Tom. From that time on, she always included a small toy in the package of food. Once it was a set of tin doll dishes with Mickey Mouse on them. The children were intrigued but mystified. German kids knew nothing of Mickey Mouse. Another time there were 4 jigsaw puzzles, each made up of 7 large pieces. Time and time again, Susie would carefully put them together and then study the picture. A pretty girl with blonde curls in a frilly rose-red dress, playing with a dollhouse. A freckled boy raking leaves into a tiny wheelbarrow in front of his white clapboard house. The scenes were exotic and unfamiliar, pictures of something Susie had never seen, a country not ravished by war. Another package contained a 3-inch long baby doll, and another strange utensil that had turning blades when you pushed it. Nobody could figure out what it was. Susie used to pretend she was whipping cream or sharpening a pencil. Only when she came to America 15 years later did she discover its use. It was a toy replica of a hand-pushed lawnmower. Don't make too much whipped cream with a lawnmower, do you? But the most marvelous thing of all was a small sky blue sleigh with curved runners. It had intricate gingerbread decorations and 2 yellow seats. A St. Bernard was hitched to it with a red harness, and 2 tiny children were waving their hands as they gleefully glided along. But the entire toy fit into the palm of Susie's small hand. For several years, Lillian's packages arrived at regular intervals, always containing the most essential food items. In addition to Susie's toy, there were other treats, a Hershey chocolate bar or a bag of hard candy. Sometimes the food was puzzling, like the jar filled with a thick brown paste. Lottie tried to eat a spoonful and discovered that while it tasted good, it stuck to her mouth. That was their introduction to peanut butter. As the years went by and the country recovered from the war, starvation was no longer a constant threat. Now 6, Susie was just getting ready to start school when she caught whooping cough. Day and night she was racked by spasms of coughing that made it impossible to breathe. For weeks she had the terrifying feeling she was going to suffocate, and Mother and Lottie took turns sitting by her bed, wiping the sweat off her blue little face. Finally she recovered, and Helene laid out the clothes she would need for school. During her daughter's illness, she had washed and ironed Susie's few clothes, and now she tried them on her. Oh, horror, she gulped. Lottie, look. Susie outgrew her clothes while she was sick. And school starts tomorrow, Lottie said. What are we going to do? That afternoon, another package arrived from Lillian Bunch. These were always red-letter days, and again the family gathered around and waited eagerly for the string to be cut. As the wrapping paper fell away, there arose the now familiar smell they associated with America. When the flaps were folded back, everybody gasped in surprise. For the first time in 3 years, the box contained no food. Instead, it was filled with dresses for a 6-year-old girl. A blue and white striped dress with a white bib, a plaid dress with ruffles and puffed sleeves, a red polka dot that tied in the back. Each dress was exquisite. These were clothes like the girls in the picture puzzles wore. No one in Germany owned anything so beautiful. Round-eyed, Susie watched as the marvelous carton was unpacked, and at the very bottom there appeared a small red button-up cardigan. Well, this red sweater immediately caught Susie's fancy. Of all the clothes she owned, she loved it the most. She wore it until the elbows were worn through, and Helene had to cut the sleeves off and make it into a short-sleeved sweater, and it served for another year. By that time it had grown too small and was very shabby, but still, no matter how much Helene coaxed and pleaded, Susie could not be persuaded to get rid of it. Then one day it disappeared. When Susie woke up in the morning, the sweater had simply vanished. Kurt, Gerd, Lottie, Moody, have you seen my sweater? They just shrugged their shoulders. Disconsolately, Susie ran from room to room and searched the wardrobes and drawers. No sign of the red sweater. Finally, she realized that it was gone for good. She didn't talk about it much anymore, but she remembered. Fall came and then winter. Finally, it was Christmas. Under the tree was a small gift for everyone, but hidden away in the back was a box for Susie. Eagerly, she wanted to tear the paper off, but Papa Franz said, "Slow down, don't tear the paper or the ribbon. Open the wrappings carefully so we can use them again." So painstakingly, her small fingers peeled away the wrappings. Finally, the lid came off. Susie took one look inside and squealed with delight. There was an entire outfit for her baby doll. A hat, a scarf, mittens, a sweater, and pants. Mother had carefully cut her red sweater apart and remade it into doll garments. And Susie was thrilled. Now she could keep her red sweater forever. Many years later, after Susie had immigrated to the United States and settled at Pacific Union College in Indio, California, she found that Lodi was not too far away. She contacted the pastor there and arranged to visit the church on a Sabbath morning. She told the story of that miraculous first parcel of food in hopes that a church member would remember having sent it. No one did. And at that point, Susie didn't remember Lillian Bunch's name, and Lillian wasn't present that day. So, she didn't hear about it. Okay, sorry, I flipped the page on myself. Many years later, Susie received a phone call at work. "My name is Lillian Bunch," the voice on the other end said. "I sent packages to your family after the war." "Oh," Susie cried, "how did you find me? I've been looking for you for years." So the two women arranged to meet, and Lillian came to Angwin to visit Susie. She told a strange story. She and her sister were planning a trip to Germany. Lillian remembered the Hassel family and wondered if she could locate any of them. She looked up the name in the SDA yearbook and found Kurt Hassel listed as a pastor in Germany. Recognizing that he was one of the children, she wrote to him and asked to visit him. He in turn told her that his sister lived at PUC. So now finally Susie was able to tell her benefactor how Lillian's generous packages had literally kept the Hassel family alive. She showed Lillian the little blue sleigh and the doll clothes made from the sweater, gifts she had treasured for 30 years and brought with her to America, and the two women embraced with both of them crying. "How did you come to send packages to us in the first place?" Susie asked when she had dried her tears. "I heard about the terrible poverty in Germany," Lillian said. "I was a mother with young children then, and my heart went out to the German people. I wanted to help a family in need, so I went to my pastor. Together we picked a name out of the SDA yearbook, and it was your father's. When did you start sending us parcels?" "In 1947. Well, that meant someone else then had sent the very first package, since it had arrived a whole year before. Lillian knew nothing about it. Where had it come from? That's the end of that chapter.
The
That was a
mystery,
short one.
the intrigue.
We only have 4 more pages left in the book.
Well, finish them.
All right. I gotta find another book for next week. By the fall of 1945, it was abundantly clear that though the war was over, prejudice against Sabbath keepers was not. Kurt, who was now attending the gymnasium, which was the German equivalent to high school, came home time and time again reporting the discrimination. "The teachers are scheduling all tests on Sabbath, so I will miss them. They won't let me make them up," he complained. Another time it was, "They won't let me participate in the speech contest because I was not in class on Sabbath." Every week there were new grievances while Kurt's grades plummeted. Because of the Sabbath problems, Franz and Helene had already decided earlier they would not send Lottie to the gymnasium, but would let her finish only the compulsory 8 grades of elementary school. Now they made up their minds to take Kurt out of school also and apprentice him to learn a trade, knowing that without the completion of the gymnasium, he would never be able to attend the university. At 8 o'clock one morning, Franz went to the courthouse downtown where the employment agency was located to search for an apprenticeship for his son. As he walked upstairs, he heard someone call out, "Franz, Franz!" The voice sounded familiar, but in the dark corridor, Franz couldn't be sure who it was. Then he saw a man sitting on a bench, Lieutenant Goodchalk, Peter Goodchalk. "Peter, what are you doing here?" "I have to go in there," Peter replied, jerking his head in the direction of a nearby courtroom. "What's happening?" "It's an American military tribunal that is bringing all Nazis to trial." "I'm really interested in that whole process," Franz said. "When I'm done upstairs, I'll come and listen in." So Franz was delighted to discover that a horticulture apprenticeship was available. That was ideal for Kurt, who loved nature and all things living, and close enough to the apartment that Kurt could bike home for lunch every day. So breathing a prayer of gratitude, Franz left. Downstairs, the court was already in session. Franz, the only civilian spectator, took a seat in the back row. As he took his seat, he heard the judge read a list of accusations against Peter Goodchalk. Franz marveled at how many details the judge knew. Even before the war had started, Peter had been a concentration camp guard accused of unusual cruelty. Later, he participated in the Kristallnacht, November 8th of 1938, a night of persecution against Jews that got its name for all the broken shop window glass. In less than 20 hours, $23 million worth of damage was done. To each charge, Goodchalk replied flatly, "I don't know anything about that. I have no memory of that." Speechless, Franz shook his head. In the army, Goodchalk often bragged about his exploits, and on the Kristallnacht he had personally led a detachment of Nazis that burned down a Jewish synagogue. The judge, who would have none of his memory loss, knew many details about this event. He knew the make of the truck Goodchalk had ridden in, the exact time of the incident, because the truck driver had testified against him. Citing the details, the judge said, "Herr Goodchalk, I want you to tell me what you did during those 15 minutes. Again, Goodchalk said, "I cannot remember anything." Meanwhile, the bailiff stepped up to Franz. "I see you shaking your head. Do you know this man?" "Oh yes," said Franz, "I know him very well. I'm just surprised that he doesn't remember anything. We were together during the war and he told us many stories." "Would you be willing to serve as a witness?" "No, sir, I'm a Christian. I won't testify against him." The trial lasted until 11 o'clock, and in disgust the judge said to Goodchalk, "You remind me of a worker in the Adler motorcycle plant. He had stolen a motor and was carrying it on his shoulder, ready to walk out the gate when he was stopped and questioned by the guard. 'What do you have on your shoulder?' 'What? Where?' 'There on your shoulder. You're carrying a motor.' 'I don't know anything about that. Someone must have loaded it onto my shoulder when I wasn't paying attention.'"
Wow.
Turning to Goodchalk, the judge continued, "That's how you strike me. Now I will give you 1 week. If in that time you can't find any witnesses that can vouch for your innocence during those 15 minutes, you are done for. Court is adjourned." Franz and Goodchalk walked out together. "Peter," Franz said, "how could you lie like that? You bragged to us about killing Jews and destroying stores and the synagogue in Frankfurt. And remember the Jew in the Ukraine that I pulled out of the pit? If I had told everything I know, you would go to prison now. All during the war you were my enemy and tried to do me in because I'm a Christian. But now my Christianity is your salvation. Because of it, I remained silent rather than testify against you." On the steps the men parted, and Franz never learned what became of Lieutenant Goodchalk. Franz got word that his friend Karl had also been released. Karl lived across from the Adventist church in Frankfurt, so every Friday night before Vespers, Franz visited him. One evening, Karl came to the door very worked up. "Franz, I got a letter from Hauptmann Mikas. In order to be employed again as a professor of history, he needs an affidavit stating that he committed no war crimes. Remember how he wanted to shoot me in 1942 because I said we had already lost the war? I am not going to write any such thing. He always had it in for me. The very nerve." But silently Franz listened while making his own plans. The following week he visited their mutual friend Willie and casually asked for the Hauptmann's address in the town of Lahn. Then he wrote his own affidavit. He gave his own credentials, his name, birth date, birthplace, the fact that he had never been a party member, and the fact that he was a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He continued, even though Mr. Mikas was a committed member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, he was a team player who would have gone through fire for us. Then he recounted the time that Mikas had let a soldier off the hook who had been drunk on guard duty, how he had saved the soldier who had talked about defecting to the enemy, how he had saved Franz when Franz said Hitler was a scoundrel, and many other incidents. He sent this document with a cover letter to Hauptmann Mikas. 3 days later, Franz received a response. Dear Comrade Hassel, please allow me to call you that. I never had any idea you were not a party member. Please accept my sincerest appreciation for your document. As a result of this affidavit, Professor Mikas was acquitted and allowed to teach again. One Sabbath in 1953, Franz was preaching in the small town of Lahn. Afterwards, the church elder, a dentist, invited him home for dinner. I can't stay very long, Franz explained. My old Hauptmann lives somewhere around here and I want to visit him. Oh, said the dentist. Who is it? I know everybody. His name is Mikas. Well, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but Professor Mikas died last year. I'm sad to hear that, Franz said. Let me tell you a little about him. He recounted some of his war experiences with the Hauptmann, how he'd given the officer a Bible study on the image in Daniel, and how Mikas had borrowed his Bible. With growing interest in his eyes, the dentist followed the story. When Franz finished, he nodded his head. Now he said, I understand something that has puzzled me for years. I don't know if you realized it when you served with him, but Mikas was a Catholic. You remember how Catholics created so many difficulties for Adventist children who didn't attend school on Sabbath. Well, every one of my children had Mikas for a teacher, and he always gave them their Sabbaths off, never ever scheduled tests on Sabbath. And I often wondered why, but now I see. I am so grateful that all my children were able to finish the gymnasium. Before Franz left, the family formed a circle and prayed, and together they thanked God for his guiding hand through all their lives. On the way home, Franz reflected on what he had heard. Lord, you prepared a way for these children to get an education, but the door seems closed to my own. What would you have us do? The decision to send the child to the gymnasium had to be made at the end of 4th grade. It was time to decide for Gerd. The family gathered one evening in the living room for worship. Gerd, Franz began, you remember the trouble Kurt had at the gymnasium. I've made inquiries and learned that his old teachers are still there. From other Adventists I know that in order to succeed one needs to attend school on Sabbath. Franz pulled out his handkerchief and blew his nose noisily. I know how you love learning, he continued. You would like to study at university. If we don't send you to the gymnasium, you will not have this opportunity. What do you want to do? Everyone's eyes were on Gerd as he swallowed hard. And then, without hesitation, he said, Papa, I don't want to go through what Kurt went through, and I want to keep the commandments. I will stay in elementary school and do an apprenticeship. Helene put her arms around Gerd and held him tight. She understood the sacrifice he was making. Then the family knelt together while Franz prayed. Lord, all through the war you protected us and in the end brought us back together safely. Now Gerd has decided to be faithful in Sabbath keeping rather than get a higher education. I pray you will not let this be a disadvantage to him as he prepares to work for you. The family rose and formed a circle and once again sang their favorite hymn. A mighty fortress is our God, we will not fear, for God hath willed his truth to triumph through us. The body they may kill, God's truth abideth still. His kingdom is forever. Franz served as a pastor in the Frankfurt area until the publishing work resumed in 1950. He eventually became publishing secretary for the Central European Division. In addition to his work, he chose to visit every Adventist church in Germany on a rotating basis and preach the Sabbath sermon. After his retirement in 1965, he continued to colporteur with the aim of finding people with whom to study the Bible, and this he continued doing until he died at age 92. As a result of his work, many were baptized, and at the end of his life he had read the Bible through 89 times. Many young people whom he had befriended attended his funeral, and one of them summarized the loss they felt by asking disconsolately, "Who will pray for us now?" Helene developed rheumatoid arthritis following the war. She suffered pain until she died at age 82. During the last 20 years of her life, she was so crippled that she was bedridden. She often questioned why God allowed her suffering. It was not until after she was anointed, according to the injunction in James 5, that she accepted her illness and was able to find peace. And during those last 20 years, she wrote more than 2,000 poems. Kurt finished his horticulture apprenticeship and then went to the Marienhof Seminary and took his ministerial course there. He attended Newbold College for a year and then became a pastor and evangelist in Germany. He is retired and lives in southern Germany, and he is still active in conducting spiritual emphasis seminars. Kurt and his wife Bärbel have 3 children, Frank, Jutta, and Bettina. Frank completed a PhD at Andrews University and is part of the theology faculty at Bogenhofen Adventist Seminary in Austria. Jutta is a nurse, and she is at home raising her 2 young children. And Bettina lives with her husband in Bern, where she works as a secretary for the Euro-Africa division. Lisa Lottie married an American serviceman and immigrated to the United States. Until her retirement, she worked in the Home Health Education Office of the Pacific Union Conference. She lives in Southern California. She and her husband William have 2 children, Ted and Susan. Ted is a physical therapist and Susan is a church school teacher. Gerd, finished an apprenticeship as an electrician. Then he went to the Marienhof Seminary and took the ministerial course. Unable to go to university in Germany, he came to the United States to complete his education at Atlantic Union College, Andrews University, and Vanderbilt University, where he received his PhD. For many years, he was a professor at the Adventist Theological Seminary at Andrews in Berrien Springs, Michigan, where he was an internationally renowned Old Testament scholar. He published 14 books and more than 300 articles. He was killed in a car accident in 1994, and his favorite hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," was performed at his funeral. His wife Hilda still lives at Berrien Springs, where she teaches church school. They had 3 children, Michael, Marlena, and Melissa. Michael got a PhD from the University of Arizona and is part of the theology faculty at Southern Adventist University in Tennessee. Marlena is a dietitian. Melissa is a school teacher. Susie studied for 2 years at Newbold College. When Gerhard received a call to teach at Southern Missionary College in Tennessee, he invited her to join him and Hilda there to complete her education. At SMC, she met and married her husband Bill, and since 1975, she and her family have been at Pacific Union College, where Bill is a professor of physics. Susie earned an MA degree in clinical psychology and is a licensed marriage, family, and child therapist. She did private practice counseling for 10 years. When she became registrar at Pacific Union College in California in 1993, she learned that Lillian Bunch's son Tom was a registrar at Southwestern Adventist College in Texas. She has spent 4 summers in Russia conducting evangelistic meetings for children. She and Bill have 2 children, Rico and Marcus, and Rico works in the computer center at Pacific Union College. Marcus is a physical therapy assistant. And I believe that's the end of the book. That's kind of the follow-up. Susie, I think, is the one who wrote the book, the youngest one. So now we have finished that story, and we find a new one to do. And you're back with us now, guys. Seville, these are friends of ours from British Columbia who are watching over Skype.
Oh wow, that's nice.
And I don't know if you can see Seville over there in the corner, but she's visiting us today. She was a member of our church in Christiansburg, but she moved away from the area and she came back to visit today. Isabel. Come here. Come on.
So it's interesting at the end of the book there, they give all of this biography of all the things that people are doing with their lives and had done, etc. And why do you think all that was possible?
So if I close this, that should disconnect.
I mean, that family seemed like they were really blessed, right?
Extremely.
Absolutely.
Extremely blessed.
They were firm believers. They knew with God anything is possible.
Yeah.
So regardless of what they went through, God was there with them, and the Bible tells us if we trust and believe in Him, nothing is impossible.
That's right.
One of the interesting parts of the story was that he fought in the German army. Why are we getting feedback here?
You're getting an echo because they're listening to speakers.
Oh, because you're listening on speakers that are feeding back. He fought in the German army, and he didn't want to carry a weapon, so he made a gun out of wood and painted it to look like a pistol
Wow.
and carried it in his holster for the whole war.
And God performed, of course, you haven't heard all the stories, but God performed all kind of miracles for him as well as the rest of his family while they were going through this hell of warfare. You know, so it's just amazing that because of their faithfulness, as you were saying, God honored that and really blessed their family tremendously.
It's pretty funny. You talk about most people in the war living paycheck to paycheck. They left like miracle to miracle.
That's right. That's really what it was. So,
I love that with the one potato and 6 slices. We don't realize how good we have it, do we?
there's a saying that man's extremity is God's opportunity. And that was certainly the case with that family there. They were often found themselves in very extreme circumstances, and they had the faith in God that God would somehow carry them through, pull them through, make it work somehow. And that's what they experienced in their life. So, very inspirational story. And of course that's why we do it, because it says something to us, right?
Yeah.
It says that you know, we live, of course, we know nothing of the hell that they lived through during that time. Of course, our time is yet coming when we'll have to face, I think, maybe even more dire circumstances than that, because we're coming down to the close of probationary time. And you can better believe that the enemy is not going to sit idly by and allow anyone to coast to the end.
The closer we get to the end,
The
the
more
harder
severe,
we're going to have it.
the more severe. Okay? We'll see things happen that will be unbelievable, totally unbelievable. And will we be able to have, and how will we be able to have the same type of commitment that this family had?
You'll have to have it in order to stand.
Yeah, it'll have to be there. It'll have to be.
But if you don't learn it now, you won't have it then.
That's right. It's God works on a conditioning aspect. He prepares you along the way. So as things take place in your lives today, just recognize that God is trying to prepare us for tomorrow and trying to prepare us for what lies ahead. So.
I think throughout the story, they were so faithful to the word. They were so faithful to ensure that at every step they honored him, that he in turn honored them with the opportunity to do things and to become educated. But at the bottom was the fact that they chose to honor him, and they were honored in return.
That's right, and their lives really became quite a blessing to countless thousands of other people. You know, when you consider the things that they went into, the family, the things that Rose was reading there, what a blessing that was extended to multiple thousands of people. That's the way it works.
Paul said to be thankful in all things.
Yeah.
How many times have we been thankful when we didn't have the gas to get from point A to point B, or when we had a flat tire, or something like that? You know, if things don't go our way, then God is against us.
Yeah, typically everyone has their own agenda
Sure.
in mind. I remember when we went over to Africa, to Malawi, to speak to some of the people over there. We were supposed to be using a conference vehicle, and so we went over to the office to pick up the vehicle that we were supposed to use, and they told us, "Oh, that vehicle has to be inspected. You know, you can't have it yet." And we said, "Well, when can we have it?" And they said, "It's going to be probably a few hours that you're going to have to wait." And we thought, wow, in a few hours we're supposed to be at, over here. We were on a schedule. We had our agenda all lined out.
You had your agenda, but not God's
Right.
agenda.
So what happened was the people there at the office said, well, look, they knew a little bit of what we were doing. We were taking the archaeology discovery research through Malawi. And They said, listen, we know a guy that might be interested in what you're doing, and now you got some time. Would you like to go over and talk with him? And we said, yeah, why not? We can't do anything now. And so we borrowed a vehicle from somebody in the office there, and we went about 10 minutes down the road, and we pulled up in front of a television station. It was TV Malawi. And we went in and we talked to a guy named Sweeney Chikunga. And he was the program manager and so forth. And we shared with him a little bit of what we were doing. And he said, wow, that's fantastic. He said, would you have time to come into the studio and do a live presentation?
Wow.
And we said, would we? Well, yeah, we got some time. So we went into the station there and we did a 1-hour broadcast that ended up being aired over TV Malawi 3 times while we were actually in the country. And then after we left, because we were there for several weeks, and after we left, it was continually aired. And we thought we would go over there and talk to 10, 15, 20,000 people, and we did. We in our 3 weeks that we were there, we talked to about 20,000 people in our meetings. But God said, son, let me show you what can happen here. And with that broadcast reached 20 million people. Those broadcasts. And so it was a very eye-opening and humbling experience to see God at work. When you think you're going to go do something for Him, and He says, step aside. Step aside, let me show you what can really happen here. And that's the way we are. We have our own agenda. And even if it's one that is designed to do great things for God, it's nothing compared to what He can do, the doors He can open, and the way He can get the message out. So I'm very optimistic that the message of the gospel, despite all the obstacles that the enemy will try to throw in the path of faithful believers, God's just going to open doors and make it happen, because eternal life is what's at stake. And so everyone's going to have the opportunity to make that choice. But to be an instrument in God's hand to be used to help make that possible for other people, that is so incredible. There's nothing greater than just being an instrument in His hand to help promote the cause of truth and the cause of the gospel. It's absolutely astounding. And there'll come a moment in time, maybe several, when you're in the kingdom made new, and somebody will come up and say, you know what, if you hadn't done this, if you hadn't been here, if you hadn't have said that, I wouldn't be here today. Wow. Can't put a price on that.
We don't know how many people we actually touch unaware of.
Yeah. Scripture is pretty clear. For the grace of God that bringeth salvation have appeared to all men, will appear to all men. Everyone is going to have an opportunity. God's going to see to it. And of course He wants to use any and all of us to bring all that about. And He will, if we're willing. So. Okay, so that was a great story. Great story to have. It's time for us now to go into our study. What's today? What are people kind of honoring or celebrating today? What's the 30th of September? What is that?
Yom Kippur.
Okay, it's Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur today. And what is Yom Kippur?
That's what I wanted to
I don't
ask
know,
you.
but it's wrote on my calendar.
It's right on the calendar.
Day of Atonement.
It's the Day of Atonement, right? We 10 days ago, that we talked about last week. We talked about the Feast of Trumpets, which began on the first day of Tishri, which is the 7th month of the sacred Jewish calendar. And now we come to the 10th day. And the 10th day is of the 7th month is, of course, Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement. It is, and was, and from Scripture, still is the most holy day in all of Judaism. The Day of Atonement. Okay? Now let me read as a kind of a kickoff for our time this morning. We go to Hebrews chapter 7. This will be our text here. Hebrews chapter 7. And let's see. Actually, let me just back up a sec here.
Where we at? Hebrews, you said?
Yeah, but it's not the verses I'm looking at here. Let me just read it out of the book here. I think they've got the wrong reference in here. This is Hebrews chapter 9, I think it's got here. Yeah, it's Hebrews chapter 9, I'm sorry. Hebrews chapter 9, verses 7, 11 to 12, it says, But into the second part the high priest went alone once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the people's sins committed in ignorance. And then in 10 and 12, 11 and 12, it says, But Christ came as high priest of good things to come, and with greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood he entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. And so, this is what took place on the Day of Atonement. It was the high priest that would go ahead and go into the most holy place. It was only accessed, as you all know, this particular day of the year. Okay? And so what we want to do today is talk about some of the unique things that occurred on that day, and what was the main significance of that particular festival that
All
was
of the
celebrated.
sins being transferred.
Pardon me?
All the sins being transferred
Okay.
to the scapegoat and being taken out, and the whole thing cleansed.
The whole thing was cleansed. Okay, so
Tabernacle's cleansed.
it was kind of like what you would do with a computer almost, where you'd hit you reboot a computer, all the junk is kind of wiped away and taken care of, and then you kind of get a fresh start. And they would go through this, of course, every year. Now, what's God trying to say? Why did he have this in place? What's he really trying to get across? What message is he trying to get across to humanity? Of course, the Jewish people directly, but to humanity in general, what's the message that he's trying to get across?
That Christ is going to be our scapegoat, and our sins is placed upon him, that we will have the opportunity to receive eternal life.
Right. In other words, they were going through a daily service all throughout the year, okay? And any confessed sin was in a sense being collected. Right now, when I say collected, why was the sin going into the tabernacle, into the sanctuary, into the holy place? What was the purpose of, why couldn't a person just come to the tabernacle, confess their sin over the head of the goat, slay the goat or the offering, and have the priest just take just let the blood run on the ground?
The blood had to be sprinkled upon the altar.
Okay. The blood had to be ministered,
Applied.
it had to be applied, had to be shed, which meant that there was a death.
The death ain't nothing. If there's no shedding, if there's no application of the blood, the death means nothing.
Okay. Well, what's interesting, Larry, about that is that within Christianity today, and I'm talking just in a general sense, within Christianity today, that's the whole ball of wax. The whole ball of wax is the death of Jesus and the Messiah, and the fact that his blood was shed. Okay, that is the entire emphasis within Christian circles today. Jesus died. He took your place. He died, right? Okay. But there's more to it, and we know there's more to it because the protocol that's outlined here in Scripture as to what they would do, particularly on the Day of Atonement, where they would not only was the blood shed, which proved that there was a victim, okay, but then they would collect that blood, and then they would take that blood and they would minister that blood in the sanctuary. Okay?
See, I've heard you say, if the sacrifice that had been made at the exit of Egypt, when the Israelites come out of Egypt, if the blood of the lamb had been, if the lamb had been killed and the lamb on the front porch, it ain't worth a dime, unless the blood is applied to the doorpost.
Yeah, that's a very